Some people inherit houses, others land. I inherited a dirt road 5 dusty miles of red clay and gravel cut straight through the heart of my family's ranch in Central California. It may not sound like much. No streetlights, no guardrails, no asphalt. Just a winding ribbon of earth that snakes past creeks, over hills, and through oak groves that have stood since before the Civil War. But that road was everything. It was our connection to the world beyond the fences. It led to town, to supplies, to school buses, and vet visits. It was how we moved cattle during storms, how my father hauled in hay, and how my grandfather once drove my grandmother to the hospital when she went into labor with my father in the middle of a thunderstorm. That road was history, and more importantly, it was ours. I've lived on the ranch all my life. My name's Nathan Cole. I'm 48 years old, a fourth-generation rancher, a widower, and as of the last 2 years, the only remaining member of the Cole family still living on this land. It's quiet out here. Most days I wake up before the sun, feed the horses, check the fence line, and end the day with a walk down to the pond Sarah used to love sitting by before the cancer took her. I don't need much, never have. But I do need that road. It wasn't until the developers came that things started to shift. They bought up the old Ramsey property next to my eastern pasture and turned it into what they called a sustainable luxury enclave. Translation: 27 oversized stucco homes with solar panels, artificial turf, and an HOA that thought it ran the county. I wasn't invited to the ribbon cutting, didn't need to be. But the first time, I saw the HOA president, Craig Thornton, a man who looked like he'd never stepped in mud in his life. He was walking the fence line with a clipboard and a drone buzzing over his shoulder. He gave me a wave, like I was some sort of park ranger. I didn't wave back. I tried to stay out of their way. I figured they'd enjoy their imported palm trees and gourmet mailboxes, and I'd keep to my side of the barbed wire, tending to my cattle and minding my business. But then came the letter, typed, sealed in an envelope with a golden HOA emblem. Delivered not by the post office, but by a uniformed security guard who rolled up my drive in a black golf cart like it was a tank. The letter was short, smug, and infuriating. To Mr. Nathan Cole, the HOA of Crestview Estates is exercising its jurisdictional authority over the access road currently connecting your property to State Route 9. In accordance with our newly adopted traffic security measures, the road will be gated and locked, with access granted only to approved residents and guests. We appreciate your cooperation in promoting a safer community. Sincerely, Craig Thornton, HOA President. I read it twice, then a third time. They weren't asking. They were declaring. The road in question, the one they referred to so casually, was the same dirt road my great-grandfather had carved out with a team of mules in 1912. It ran through my land, skirted the edge of what was now the new development, and joined the county-maintained road just east of their neighborhood. And now they wanted to gate it. I drove out that afternoon and followed the path toward the entrance of Crestview Estates. Sure enough, there were stakes in the ground. Contractors in orange vests, measuring, drilling, prepping for installation. A large sign had already been staked. Future site of controlled access point, private entry only. I parked my truck, stepped out, and walked right up to the man holding a blueprint. Morning, I said, forcing civility. He looked up. Can I help you, sir? You can tell me what the hell you're doing on my easement. He blinked. This is HOA jurisdiction, sir. We have approval from the board. I didn't ask the board, I said. I'm telling you, you're trespassing on a privately deeded ranch road. He shrugged and pointed to the blueprint. My job is to build what's on the page. Then your job is about to run into a fence post, I said, and walked away before I did something I'd regret. That night, I pulled every document I had, deeds, surveys, historical easements, and sure enough, clear as day was a 1927 agreement between my grandfather and the county, confirming that the road, though open to public utility, remained private property under the Cole Ranch. I made copies and delivered them to the HOA office the next morning. A prefab building with too much chrome and not enough soul. The receptionist took my folder and said, "We'll have legal review this." She said it like I'd submitted a coupon for expired milk. Days passed, then a week. Then the gate went up. It was black wrought iron with keypad entry surveillance cameras on each side and a shiny plaque that read, "Crestview Residents Only. Violators will be prosecuted." I stared at it from the driver's seat of my truck, blood simmering. I keyed in the code Craig had smugly texted me, as a courtesy only to get an error message. I was locked out. Not just out of their development, but out of my own damn road. So I did what any sane man would do. I drove the long way around, adding 30 minutes and 2 unpaved creek crossings to get into town and back. I figured I'd take it up with the county, file a formal complaint, let the law do what it's supposed to. Only the law moved slow. HOA lawyers filed an injunction claiming public safety concerns. They argued that increasing wildland access via the road presented liability risks for Crestview residents. They cited made-up statistics about trespassing incidents and livestock threats. Meanwhile, I was watching supply trucks, emergency responders, and ranch hands all being rerouted or delayed because some gated community wanted their road to feel more exclusive. My letters went unanswered. My meetings with the HOA board were cut short. And when I confronted Craig in person, he said, "I'm sorry, Nathan, but we have to prioritize the needs of the community. Perhaps you should consider updating your access route through the back pasture." The back pasture was a 100-foot ravine with no bridge. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about safety. It wasn't even about traffic. It was about power, about reminding the dusty old rancher that he didn't belong in their pristine picture of wine nights and lawn yoga. So I waited. I documented everything, every delay, every denial, every time an ambulance had to turn around because the road was closed. But even I didn't expect what came next. It started with smoke, a distant plume rising from the west like a slow-moving shadow. And it ended with fire. Fire that moved faster than any of us had ever seen. Fire that laughed at locked gates. The smoke rose like a signal, first faint, then thick, then terrifying. By mid-morning, it painted the sky an angry orange. And by noon, the air stung my eyes, even inside the house. I'd seen fires before. Growing up out here, they were part of life like drought and dust. But this one was different. It moved fast, too fast. And it was headed straight for us. I was in the barn when the alert hit my phone, red flag emergency. Mandatory evacuation advisory, in effect for Crestview and surrounding properties. Crestview, that meant me. That meant the new development. That meant every house behind that shiny black gate. I threw on my coat, grabbed my emergency binder, and fired up the diesel. As I pulled out onto the main road, I could see the plume bending with the wind, rolling over the ridge like a beast that didn't care who built what. I punched the number for the county's fire emergency line. It rang 4 times before a tired voice answered. "This is Cole Ranch. The west side of the ridge is already catching. I've got livestock and fuel tanks that need clearing." "We're stretched thin, Mr. Cole," the dispatcher said. "Our engines are focused on Route 19. That's the main access corridor." I knew what that meant. They were blocking the highway. That road would be a dead end within the hour. I also knew something else, something the HOA either forgot or never knew. Their development had exactly 2 ways out. The main road leading east, and my ranch road leading south. If both were blocked, they were boxed in. A cul-de-sac of multi-million-dollar houses with nowhere to run. I turned toward the ridge just as the first edge of the fire lit the crown of a hill with flame. The smoke was darker now, black and fast-moving. I floored the truck and veered toward the HOA gate. I didn't know exactly what I was planning to do, but I knew I had to get there. When I arrived, the street was chaos. Cars were lined up inside the gate bumper to bumper horns blaring. People stood outside their SUVs waving their arms. Some cried, some screamed. Craig Thornton was at the keypad, furiously punching in numbers that weren't working. The power must have been out. The system had defaulted to lockdown. Good. I parked the truck, jumped out, and ran toward the gate. Craig spun around. His face was pale, his voice panicked. "The code isn't working. We're locked in. No backup power. It shut down when the grid went out. The batteries must be dead." I looked up. The smoke was closing in. The flames weren't far behind. I could already hear the low groan of wind shifting, feeding the fire with oxygen. "You have a manual key?" I asked. "No. Maintenance was outsourced. I turned and walked back to my truck without waiting for him to finish. No time for blame. I unhooked the chain from the back hitch and pulled around to the side of the gate where the post met the ground. Then I floored it. The first hit shook the frame. The second cracked the post. On the third, the gate bent like a child's toy, ripping from its bolts with a shriek of twisted steel. Gasps erupted. People ran toward the opening, waving others through. "Go!" I shouted, standing between my truck and the flames. "Don't wait, go now!" Craig stood frozen. It took a shove from a neighbor to snap him out of it. Within seconds, the road was filled with movement. Minivans, sedans, trucks, all streaming down the ranch road. People shouted thanks. Others cried as they passed. Some just stared at me, their faces marked with soot and fear and something else, humility. I didn't move. Not yet. I waited until the last car rolled through the tailpipe, coughing smoke. Only then did I turn the truck around and head after them, the wall of fire not 30 yards behind. When I crested the hill at the southern edge of the ranch, I looked back. The gate was gone, the blacktop scorched, but everyone was safe. For now. The fire didn't stop there. It raged through the edge of the development, took out 3 homes, and singed a dozen others. It roared through brush and fencing-claimed barns and vehicles, and eventually burned itself into containment after 3 full days of battle. But no one died, not a single person. And that wasn't because of a fire truck. It was because of that road, the one they tried to take away. A week later, I got a visit. Not from the HOA, not from the sheriff, from the press. A reporter from Channel 8 had heard about the gate, the fire, the standoff. He asked if I'd be willing to talk on camera. I agreed, but only if he met me on the path. We stood where the gate used to be, the metal post still blackened. I told him everything. Showed him the documentation, the injunction, the blocked access. He nodded, took notes, and filmed B-roll as the wind stirred the ash around our feet. That night, my phone rang nonstop. Neighbors called. The mayor's office called. A retired fire chief from Oregon called and said, that gate could have been a mass grave. The HOA, they were silent for a while. Then came the apology. An open letter posted to their community page, filled with lawyerly language and half-sincere regret. It blamed system failures and miscommunication and pledged to reevaluate emergency protocols. But the damage was done. The county opened an investigation. Lawsuits began to surface. The local paper ran a headline that read, "Hero Rancher Rescues HOA from Its Own Gate." I didn't care about the praise. What mattered was this people saw. They saw how quickly control becomes danger, how bureaucracy chokes when crisis burns, and how sometimes the only way out is the path they tried to block. The smoke lingered in the air for days after the last ember was extinguished. It clung to our clothes, seeped into the porch wood, and shadowed the horizon with a brown haze. For a while, it felt like time itself had slowed. No birdsong, no idle chit-chat from neighbors, just the soft, stunned silence that always follows a close call with death. But life doesn't wait. It moves on, even if your soul hasn't caught up. I spent most of those first post-fire days walking the ranch, checking fences, counting cattle, replacing scorched wood, and tossing aside collapsed wire. The fire hadn't touched the heart of the ranch, but it had licked the edges. Charred footprints remained as evidence of nature's raw power, and I respected every blackened tree like a warning. It was 3 days after the fire that I saw the first truck roll up to the remains of the HOA gate. It was Craig, not in his suit this time, not in his golf cart, just a dusty Silverado, and a man who for the first time looked smaller than the place around him. I was hauling hay when he walked up. He had no clipboard, no swagger, just a rolled-up document tube and eyes that didn't quite meet mine. "Nathan," he said. I set the bale down and wiped my hands on my jeans. "Craig." He shifted, awkward. "I came to apologize, in person." I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch. He sighed. "We were wrong. I was wrong. About the road, about you, about all of it." Still, I said nothing. Because sometimes people need to sit in the discomfort of their own making. He held out the document tube. "The HOA board met yesterday. After some, persuasive feedback from the city and several lawyers, we've rescinded the injunction, formally. We're also removing all claims over the road, and the county's drafting new emergency access standards that'll ensure nothing like this happens again." I took the tube, unrolled the contents. There it was, black and white legal language, with signature stamps and notary seals. The road was mine again. It had always been mine. He cleared his throat. "We're also rebuilding. The gate is gone permanently, and we'd like to work with you if you're willing. Establish a mutual safety plan. Maybe even a shared emergency corridor agreement." I finally looked up. "Craig, the only reason anyone in your development is still alive is because I broke the damn gate you installed to keep me out. You understand that?" He nodded, sheepish. "Yes, I do. You made that call. You ignored my warnings. You blocked the county road like it was some resort entrance." "I know," he said, "and I'll live with that for the rest of my life." A moment passed. Then I surprised even myself. "I'm willing to talk, but if we're going to work together, it starts with respect. And respect means understanding. This road isn't just a strip of dirt. It's a lifeline. And it doesn't care about HOA rules or manicured lawns. It's here for people who need it. He nodded slowly. Understood. As he left, I watched his truck disappear down the same road he'd tried to claim, now stripped bare of its illusions of control. The next week brought a wave of attention. News outlets came by with cameras and questions. They wanted footage, quotes, drama. But I gave them the truth. Not anger, not revenge. Just the raw, plain facts of what had happened and what nearly did. One reporter asked if I considered myself a hero. I shook my head. I just did what a neighbor's supposed to do, I said. Even if the people on the other side of the fence forgot what that meant. Still, the story caught fire, no pun intended. The city council called a special meeting. I was invited to speak. I wore my best boots and a clean shirt, stood before a packed room of officials, residents, and TV cameras, and laid it out like this. We've built a world where we mistake control for safety, where we think fences make us stronger. But the truth is, no gate has ever stopped a wildfire, and no keypad ever rescued a trapped family. What saves people, what always saves people, is people. Human beings who remember that community isn't about exclusion. It's about showing up, especially when it burns. The room was quiet when I finished. Then it erupted in applause. I won't lie, it felt good. Not because I wanted the praise, but because I knew the message had landed. Afterward, a council member pulled me aside and said the city would be reviewing all HOA emergency protocols. Another thanked me for protecting our residents when policy failed. It was strange. I wasn't used to being thanked for simply doing the right thing. But maybe that's the problem. Back home, things settled. Rachel, the new head of the neighborhood safety committee, came to my porch one afternoon with a basket of cornbread and a folder labeled Fire Drill Proposal. I invited her to sit. We talked for 2 hours about access routes, emergency signage, controlled burns, and how to make sure every house in the area, old or new, was on the same page when the next fire came, because it would come. This is California. That's the deal we make to live with such beauty. Before she left, Rachel said, "We've been talking, some of us, about renaming the road." I raised an eyebrow. "To what?" She smiled. "Cole Road, if that's all right with you." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked out over the hills, charred but regrowing. A line of green already creeping back where the fire had raged, life insisting on returning. Sarah would have liked that. I nodded. "Yeah, that's all right with me." Spring arrived early that year, as if nature herself was eager to reclaim what fire had taken. Tiny green shoots pushed through scorched soil. The oaks that had blackened now wore soft halos of fresh leaves. Even the air seemed different, sweeter maybe, or just more appreciated. The old road, once dusty and weathered, became the most traveled stretch of land in the area. Folks from Crestview used it daily now. Not just during emergencies, but for walks, jogs, and bike rides. It had become a bridge, literally and figuratively, between lives that had once seemed worlds apart. I didn't expect it, and if I'm honest, part of me resisted it, because for so long, that road had felt like mine. Not just a path across land, but a legacy. The last piece of my family's story that hadn't been paved over, fenced off, or forgotten. But the fire had changed things. Not just the terrain, not just the law. It had changed us. I started seeing familiar faces on the road each morning. Laura, a nurse from Lot 14, began walking her twin daughters down to the open pasture to watch the horses. Ethan, a quiet software engineer who never used to leave his house, joined me on a few sunrise walks. And then there was Margaret, an older woman who brought her sketchpad and sat under the old sycamore drawing what she called portraits of resilience. Every now and then, someone would pause and thank me. I'd nod, usually change the subject. I wasn't in it for recognition. Truth be told, I didn't know why I kept walking that road each morning, except that it reminded me I still had roots, even after the fire, even after Sarah. One afternoon, as I was patching a broken fence near the southern bend, a city utility truck pulled up. A man in a hard hat stepped out and introduced himself as Paul. "We've got orders to place a permanent emergency marker here," he said, gesturing to the curve. "New city protocol after the wildfire review." He opened the back of the truck and brought out a metal post, a green sign with reflective lettering, and a box of bolts. The sign read Emergency Evacuation Route, Cole Road. I stared at it for a long time. Seeing it in print, my name officially part of the geography felt strange. Not in a bad way, just weighted. Like I'd stepped into my grandfather's boots and found they fit better than I thought. Paul must have noticed my silence. "Hell of a thing you did," he said. "Most folks wouldn't have gone back for the ones who tried to lock them out." I shrugged. Didn't do it for them. He grinned. "Still, it matters." He bolted the sign into place, shook my hand, and drove off, leaving behind the newest addition to a road that had outlived generations. That night, I walked the stretch again, alone. It was nearly dark. The sun had just kissed the ridge, and the sky was purple and gold. Crickets sang. The wind carried the clean scent of eucalyptus and wild grass. I stopped at the new sign, ran my fingers over the cool letters. Cole Road. It didn't feel like ownership anymore. It felt like responsibility. And maybe that was the lesson. That the land we fight for isn't ours to hoard, but ours to protect. That the stories we inherit must be shared to stay alive. That fences don't keep danger out, they just give us someone to blame, when it finds us anyway. As I stood there, headlights appeared in the distance. A small caravan of cars making their way through the open stretch, young families, dogs in back seats, grandparents leaning out to breathe in the spring air. One by one they slowed. Some waved, some smiled, some just passed in silence, the way people do, when they're finally at peace, with a place and with each other. I tipped my hat, because that's what you do when neighbors pass by. You acknowledge them. You honor the connection. You remember that, at the end of the day, we all walk the same roads, whether we built them or not. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone out here. I felt something far rarer. I felt home. By early summer, Cole Road had become more than a shortcut. It was a symbol. The fire had burned away more than brush and fence posts. It had cleared the haze of distance between people who had once passed each other like strangers on parallel tracks. Now, there was an ease to things. Conversations happened at fence lines. Neighbors waved with both hands. Children biked down the road in groups, kicking up dust and laughter behind them. And yet, for all the healing, something still lingered. Not resentment, at least not the angry kind, but a quiet discomfort, the kind that lives in the space after someone's been forgiven but not forgotten. Craig. He kept to himself after the fire. Most people figured he'd move, sell the house, disappear. But he didn't. He stayed. Trimmed his hedges, walked his dog, nodded at people but rarely spoke. He was no longer president of the HOA. He'd resigned 2 weeks after the city audit, but he still lived in the biggest house on the cul-de-sac, like a man holding on to the last rung of a ladder no one wanted to climb. One day, I found him parked on the edge of my pasture. I was fixing irrigation pipes near the property line when I saw his SUV idling just off the gravel. I walked over. He stepped out not in a suit this time, but jeans and a faded polo shirt. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe just humbled. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said. "I just wanted to talk." I said nothing but waited. He walked up slowly. "I've started volunteering. At the fire department. Logistics desk, mostly. Filing reports, running drills." I raised an eyebrow. "That's so." He nodded. "I figured, if I couldn't be trusted to lead, maybe I could help clean up what I failed to protect." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest. We stood in silence for a long while. Then I said, "You still planning that private tennis club?" He cracked a half smile. "Not anymore. That land's being rezoned for community use." "Good. I'm not trying to make things right for appearances," he said. "I'm just trying to be someone I wouldn't have hated during the fire." That got a chuckle out of me. Dry, but real. "You've got a long road ahead," I said. He looked up at the Cole Road sign. So do we all. Later that week, Rachel and Tom hosted a meeting. Not an HOA meeting, but a community potluck at the ranch. We cleared out the old barn, hung string lights from the rafters, and set up tables with casseroles, lemonade, and a few bottles of strong homebrew that Tom insisted came from a secret peach recipe. The room was full before sundown. Families, couples, older folks who remembered the land before the development, and new residents who'd only ever known it through street maps and Zillow photos. People came with stories, with laughter, with pies, and for the first time, they came without fear. Rachel stood up midway through the meal. She tapped a spoon against her mason jar and waited for the chatter to fade. "There's something about fire," she said. "It destroys, but it also reveals. It peels away what doesn't matter and it leaves behind only what's strong enough to survive. What we built in the ashes wasn't just a road, it was trust. She raised her jar. To Cole Road. And to the people who made it more than a name. They toasted, all of them. And I, sitting near the back with Sarah's old denim jacket draped over my chair, raised mine too. A few days later, I found something strange at the base of the emergency marker. A small wooden box. No lock, no hinges. Just a carved inscription on the lid. For the ones who walked through fire. Inside were notes. Dozens of them. Handwritten, folded, tucked gently like prayers into a wishing well. I didn't read all of them. Just a few. I judged too fast. I am sorry. This road saved my family. We'll never forget. Thank you for seeing us, even when we didn't see you. I closed the box and placed a flat stone on top to keep it from blowing away. Then I sat beside it for a while, listening to the wind through the sycamores. The world had changed. Not just our neighborhood, not just the land. Me. I was no longer just the rancher with the dirt road. I was the keeper of a story that people had chosen to carry with them. A story not of revenge, but of resilience. Not of winning, but of waking up. And as I stood to leave, I turned once more to look back down the road. It stretched long and quiet golden in the evening light. No gate, no lock, just possibility. Summer deepened and the days stretched long beneath the Californian sun. The pastures once scorched bloomed with new life. Wildflowers dotted the hills like soft brushstrokes, and the earth, though still healing, began to feel familiar again. Cole Road had become more than a shortcut. It was a ritual. At first, it was necessity. Then it became habit. And now it was something more, a living part of the community's rhythm. Every morning, joggers moved through its bends, school buses rumbled across its curves, and in the afternoons, you could always find someone, an old man, with binoculars, bird-watching a teenager snapping photos, a mother pushing a stroller making their way down its path. But more than that, the road had become a place of conversation. One evening, as the sun burned low over the ridge, I found a group of neighbors gathered beneath the big oak just past the old cattle gate. Someone had brought guitars, someone else a jug of iced tea. The music wasn't rehearsed, the voices not always in tune, but the sound carried through the valley with a kind of grace no choir could match. I stood nearby, leaning against a post, sipping from a tin cup and letting the notes settle into the quiet places inside me. Tom waved me over. You're not going to just watch like some wise ranch ghost. Sit down. I chuckled and walked over. They'd saved a spot, folding chair, cold drink, and all. The song ended and Rachel turned to me. We've been talking about making this permanent. The music, she smiled. The gathering, monthly, maybe even more. I nodded slowly. On the road, always, she said. This place, it brings people back to themselves. I didn't have words for it then. But she was right. That dirt road, once dismissed as a liability, had become a sanctuary. Not polished, not paved, not curated, just open, honest, whole. A few days later, I got a letter. Not the kind that arrives with a stamp. Hand-delivered. Heavy envelope, gold-embossed return address from a state office in Sacramento. It was from the California Emergency Preparedness and Land Use Commission. Inside, an official commendation. Apparently, someone, probably Rachel, had submitted a report backed by city records and news coverage of the fire, detailing how the existence and use of the Cole Ranch Road had saved lives. The letter called it an exemplary model of rural-urban shared infrastructure and emergency preparedness. But it was the closing line that hit hardest. Let this stand as proof that history, when respected, can become the foundation for survival, and that one road in the hands of a watchful steward can carry a community through fire. Enclosed was a certificate, a plaque even, and a small grant proposal for a rural fire watch station at the bend of Cole Road, funded by the state, managed by the community. I stared at it for a long time, the weight of those words pressing against a grief I'd carried alone for years. Sarah would have cried. I didn't, but I came close. By mid-July, construction began on the fire watch post. Nothing fancy, just a covered lookout with a flagpole, solar lights, a first aid kit, and a weather-resistant bulletin board. Tom painted the roof red. Rachel planted drought-tolerant succulents in clay pots along the base. On the first day it opened, we held a dedication. Neighbors showed up with lawn chairs, potluck casseroles, kids in matching t-shirts. A Boy Scout troop raised the flag. The mayor gave a short speech. Then someone handed me the microphone. I stood under the awning, Cole Road behind me. The sky a pale wash of blue. I used to think this land was mine, I said, because it was in my family, because I worked it, because I buried part of my soul here. A few heads bowed at that, but then the fire came, and I saw something I didn't expect. I saw strangers running toward danger to help each other. I saw neighbors open gates, offer rides, share water. And I realized this land isn't mine. It's ours. All of it. I paused, searching for words that would land like a stone in still water. Some roads are built with machines. Others are carved by memory. This road right here, was built with both. And it will outlive all of us, because it stands for more than direction. It stands for connection. Silence. Then applause. Soft, respectful, but deep. The kind that rises not from approval, but from understanding. In the weeks that followed, I started seeing a shift. Not big and loud. Quiet. Gentle. The HOA, once a fortress of paperwork and power, began to act more like a neighbor. Rules softened. Conversations replaced citations. People showed up to board meetings, not with complaints, but ideas. They talked about installing a water tank up on the hill for emergencies. A shared tool shed. Community barbecues that weren't segregated by cul-de-sac. One evening, I passed by Craig's house. He was on the porch reading. He looked up and for the first time offered not just a nod, but a smile. Real, no strings. I tipped my hat and kept walking. No need to say more. Some things are better left in silence, where they can settle deep and root strong. The first summer rain came in August, rare and soft, like a whispered apology from the sky. I watched it from the porch boots propped on the railing, coffee cooling beside me. The dust settled, the grass glistened, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't in years. Stillness. Not the kind born of exhaustion or waiting, but the kind that comes when the fight is over, the fences are down, and the land can breathe again. Coal roads slick with the early rain shimmered under the clouds. I could see the fire post from here, its red roof a dot of color against the muted green. Children had painted small murals on the back wall, sunsets, horses' handprints, a giant banner that read, "We remember, we rebuild." Sometimes I wondered what Sarah would say if she saw all this. My quiet ranch now a community hub. The road that once carried only me now traveled by dozens each day. She would have laughed probably, said I'd finally learned to share. One morning I found something unexpected on my porch steps. A pie. Fresh, still warm, wrapped in a gingham cloth with a note tucked underneath. "Thank you for giving us more than a road. Lot 17. No name, no expectation. Just gratitude baked in cinnamon and apple slices." That night, I brought it to the community potluck, our third official coal gathering. We held it down by the new picnic area someone had built using reclaimed wood from old ranch fencing. There were fairy lights strung from trees, coolers full of lemonade, and a row of fold-out tables covered in potluck pride. Everyone showed up, not because they had to, not to meet a quorum, but because they wanted to. And somewhere between the potato salad and the peach cobbler, I realized something. The fire hadn't just burned away the trees, it had burned away the barriers. The ones we built with silence, with judgment, with HOA bylaws and sideways glances. Now there were stories shared over coleslaw, and guitars passed between neighbors. A young couple from Lot 22 stood up and announced they were naming their newborn son Nathan. I almost dropped my cup. Tom called me over afterward. He was holding a glass of sweet tea and grinning like he had something dangerous to say. "We're thinking of making you honorary mayor of Coal Road," he said. I laughed. "What's that come with free hay and more potholes?" He raised his glass. "Legacy. And a bench with your name on it. We did build that bench, near the fire post. Oak slats, iron legs, and a plaque that read, 'In honor of Nathan Cole, who stood when others locked the gate.' I didn't ask for it, but I sat there often, not to admire anything, just to listen. To the wind through the trees, the laughter of children riding bikes, the gentle hum of a community that had finally remembered how to be human." Later that month, I was asked to speak at a statewide emergency planning summit in Sacramento. I said yes, though I wasn't sure what I could tell people that hadn't already been said. When I took the stage, I looked out over a sea of suits and notebooks and screen-lit faces, and I told them what I knew. You can have all the technology in the world, all the procedures, but when fire comes, and it will come, none of that matters if people don't know how to treat each other. The road we lost almost killed us. The road we reopened saved us. Not because it was paved, but because someone remembered to open the gate. Afterward, people lined up to thank me, to share their own stories. Some offered hugs. Others handed me letters. And then a man in a dark blue suit stepped forward, introducing himself as a state planner. He asked if I'd be willing to consult on a pilot program, one focused on integrating rural pathways into emergency grid systems, using Cole Road as the model. I nodded. Only if the model starts with people, not policies. He smiled. That's the part we've been missing. Back home, I wrote Sarah a letter. I'd done that off and on since she passed. Not every day. But when something mattered. This time, I tucked it under her favorite rock, by the pond. It said, "Hey, Sarah, I think the road is teaching me more now than ever. It's not about destination. It's about how people carry each other when the world gets heavy. And this community, they're carrying each other now. Just like we always hoped they would. I miss you more than breath some days. But I see you in the way they wave, the way they pause. And that's enough to keep me walking." I sat there until the stars came out. The wind picked up, and I could swear just for a moment I heard her voice in the trees. Autumn crept in on tiptoe, cooler mornings, golden light through thinning trees, and the kind of quiet that makes a man slow down, whether he means to or not. Out on the ranch, the rhythm shifted. The grass browned, the days shortened, and the animals started their instinctive preparations for the colder months. Cole Road, though, remained steady. If anything, its role had deepened. As summer faded, the fire memory softened into story one that parents told their kids, that newcomers asked about, that visitors followed like a local legend. It wasn't exaggerated. It didn't need to be. The facts were powerful enough: a locked gate, a wall of flame, and a rancher who tore down the barrier so strangers could survive. But now, a year later, something new was happening. People were planning, not for parties or potlucks, though those continued, but for resilience. The community had decided to host an annual wildfire preparedness weekend. Not because they feared another disaster, but because they had learned what fear not faced looked like. I was asked to open the event. The stage was simple, a flatbed trailer parked beside the fire post. Tom had strung up canvas to block the sun, and Laura's teenage son had set up a PA system borrowed from the high school band. Children ran barefoot through the grass, and volunteers handed out pamphlets on defensible space backup generators and what to pack in a go bag. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't use notes. I stood there in my old flannel shirt hat in hand and looked at the faces that had once seemed like trespassers and now looked like neighbors. We used to think safety came from walls, from rules, from locks. But safety isn't about keeping people out. It's about knowing who'll help you when everything else is gone. This road, Cole Road, was here long before most of us, and it'll be here long after. But what matters is that we walk it together, that we don't wait until the smoke is overhead to open the gates. Applause followed, not thunderous, but heartfelt. The next speaker was Rachel, who unveiled a detailed evacuation map featuring multiple access points, water resources, and a list of trained volunteer leaders by sector. She passed out walkie-talkies and laminated cards with emergency checklists. I couldn't help but smile. This wasn't just reaction anymore. It was preparation. It was maturity. Later that evening, after the crowd had thinned and the sun dipped low behind the ridge, I took my usual walk down Cole Road. The sky glowed pink and orange, and the air carried the sharp scent of oak leaves and distant rain. As I reached the fires post, I noticed a man standing quietly beneath the bench's awning. It was Craig. He looked older, leaner, more grounded somehow. He wore jeans and a county volunteer vest. In his hands, he held a cardboard box. "Evening," I said. "Evening," he replied. He opened the box and pulled out a framed photograph. It was of the old gate. Twisted, burned, fallen. He handed it to me. "I thought maybe we should put this up here," he said, pointing to the side of the post wall. "Not to dwell. Just to remember what happens when pride gets in the way of purpose." I looked at it for a long moment. The gate in that picture looked like something out of a war zone, which in a way it was. "Mount it," I said, "but leave space beside it." "For what?" "For the picture we'll take this spring when the wildflowers are back." He smiled just a little. "Deal." The next few weeks were filled with activity. Students from the local college came out to document Cole Road as part of an oral history project. Elderly residents shared stories of when the area was all cattle and silence. Children added their handprints in paint along the base of the fire post wall, red, blue, green, yellow. Someone left a note in the donation box. "This road gave me back my father. He made it out because you made a choice." There was no signature. Didn't need one. We all knew who the road had saved and who it had changed. One chilly November morning, I stood at the curve near the sycamore and watched the fog roll in. A pickup pulled up behind me. It was Emily from Lot 22 and her husband, Michael. Their baby boy, little Nathan, was strapped into the car seat, gurgling happily. She waved as they parked. He just started walking this week. No kidding, I said, walking over. Michael lifted the boy from the seat, setting him down gently on the soft gravel. The baby took 2 tentative steps, then toddled forward, wide-eyed and wobbly, until he reached the wooden signpost marking the southern edge of Cole Road. He touched it, a small hand, a small moment. But something about it caught in my chest. That's a good start, I said, my voice lower than I meant it to be. Emily smiled. It's the first road he'll ever know. I nodded. And a fine one to walk. Winter arrived with a whisper-thin frost on fence posts, breath visible in the morning air, and skies that stayed pale and thoughtful well into midday. The ranch slowed down. The soil hardened. The cattle grew shaggy and quiet. Life curled inward, conserving warmth and energy. But Cole Road kept moving, not in a loud or hurried way, but like a pulse, slow, steady, alive. Some mornings, I'd walk the path before the sun rose. Just me, the stars, and the crunch of gravel underfoot. On one of those mornings, I passed the fire post and saw that someone had left a single lantern glowing on the bench. No note. Just the soft flicker of flame in a mason jar keeping vigil against the cold. I left it there. Some things aren't meant to be moved. Around the holidays, the community organized something new, the Cole Road Candle Walk. It started as an idea from Rachel. Nothing fancy, she said. Just light, warmth, presence. She wasn't wrong. On the evening of December 21st, the longest night of the year, neighbors gathered at the north end of Cole Road, each carrying a candle lantern or flashlight. Some walked with thermoses. Others pushed strollers. A few brought dogs in holiday sweaters. We walked the road slowly, quietly, stopping at intervals to place candles along the edge, like stars fallen to earth. At the fire post, the mayor read a short poem. Tom strummed a guitar, and a young girl barely 10 stood on the bench and sang "This Little Light of Mine" with a voice so pure it made the cold vanish for a moment. When it was done, people stayed, talked, hugged, shared memories. Craig was there too, standing off to the side, quietly helping an elderly couple back to their car. No speech, no grand gesture, just presence. And me. I stood near the southern curve watching the whole thing unfold. The road aglow with tiny flames, soft laughter, and the steady rhythm of hearts that had once beat in isolation, and now in unison. The next day, I got a letter from a woman named Ellen, who had lost her home during the fire and moved north. She had read about Cole Road in a local paper and sent a handwritten note on thick stationery. I couldn't stay. The memory was too much. But I heard what you built after. And I want you to know, sometimes healing doesn't mean returning. Sometimes it means knowing that others stayed, rebuilt, and honored what was lost. Thank you for staying. I read it twice, then tucked it into the box beneath my bed, the one I'd come to call the firebox. It held everything now. Letters, photos, clippings, bits of burned bark from the sycamore, and the worn envelope with Sarah's last grocery list. Everything worth holding close. January rolled in with rain. Not hard, not dangerous. Just steady cleansing rain. It turned the road to mud, but no one seemed to mind. Neighbors learned to walk slower. Children ran barefoot, laughing even when they fell. And the mud revealed something curious: footprints. Dozens of them. Bare feet, dog paws, boot prints, tire tracks. Evidence of a road well used and well loved. I stood on the porch one afternoon watching a boy with a kite run the length of the path. The wind caught it, pulled it high, and for a moment it danced in a patch of blue sky. Behind him walked his father. Behind them, a group of neighbors. Not following, just flowing, together. And I realized that the most remarkable thing about Cole Road wasn't that it had survived the fire. It was that it had become the kind of place people brought their children, their grief, their joy, their ordinary afternoons. It had become sacred not by decree but by footsteps. And that sacredness didn't ask for recognition. It just asked to be walked. That evening, as I sat by the fire pen in hand, I began a new letter to Sarah. Hey Sarah, I think the road is teaching me more now than ever. It's not about destination. It's about how people carry each other when the world gets heavy. And this community, they're carrying each other now, just like we always hoped they would. I miss you more than breath some days. But I see you in the way they wave, the way they pause. And that's enough to keep me walking. I folded the letter and slipped it into the usual spot by the pond under her stone. Then I stood, put on my coat, and walked Cole Road. Just once more, because every time I did, I remembered who I was before the fire and who I became after it. Spring came not with fanfare, but with quiet insistence, buds on the sycamore green peeking from blackened soil, and the return of birdsong just before dawn. The air had a new kind of softness to it, like the land was exhaling. So was I. It had been nearly a year since the fire, a year since the gate fell, since people ran, since I chose to open the path rather than walk away. And now the road wasn't just part of my land, it was part of them, of us. The fire post was blooming again, literally. Someone, probably Laura, had planted lavender around the base. It smelled like calm. Teenagers had added more artwork to the back wall. One new mural showed a winding road painted in gold with silhouettes of people walking hand in hand beneath an open sky. At the top, in bold white letters, it read, "We don't walk alone anymore." I stood before it one morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise behind it. The light hit the wall just right, turning the gold into something that shimmered. Tom walked up beside me holding a toolbox. "Need to check the solar panel," he said. I nodded. "Looks good to me." He grinned. "Still, can't let a whole year go by without pretending I'm useful." He climbed up the ladder, humming as he went, and I stood, below, hands in my pockets, thinking how strange it was that so much could change without ever meaning to. That what started as a boundary, a literal line in the dirt, could become a lifeline. I remembered the day Sarah and I moved into the ranch house. She had walked that road in the rain boots, soaked through, holding my hand and smiling like the clouds were a blessing. "This place has a good soul," she'd said. Back then, I thought she meant the land. Now I knew better. She meant the people we hadn't even met yet. The ones who would come later. The ones who would stumble and fall and stand again together. That night, we held the first cold day. It wasn't my idea. The community had decided unanimously to mark the fire's anniversary, not with sorrow, but with gratitude. They called it a celebration of resilience, but to me it felt like something else. A promise. There were booths set up at each curve of the road. One for fire safety, one for land stewardship, one for neighborhood art. Children ran between them with little trail maps they got stamped at each stop. Near the bend, where the gate had once stood, we erected a simple memorial. Not marble, not metal, just weathered oak planks carved with a single sentence. "This gate opened so we could live." No names, no timeline, just truth. People placed flowers at its base, stones, letters, a small pair of child's boots. I didn't ask whose. I didn't need to. At sunset, everyone gathered at the fire post. Rachel said a few words. So did Tom. Then gently, they handed me the microphone. I looked out at the faces, hundreds of them. Faces I once feared. Faces I once felt distant from. Faces that now felt like chapters in the same book. I didn't have a speech. I had a story. A year ago, I stood here alone, watching smoke rise, feeling like no one would come if I called. And maybe back then, they wouldn't have. But I opened the gate anyway. And today, I see what came through that gate wasn't just a line of cars escaping the fire. It was you. The people willing to rebuild not just homes, but trust. To walk a road you didn't pave. To ask for forgiveness you didn't deserve. And to give thanks in ways I never expected. I paused, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. This road didn't save you. We saved each other. And if you remember anything about that day, let it be this. The gate was locked, but someone opened it anyway. There was no applause. Not at first. Just silence. Then someone began to hum. Softly. A song I didn't recognize at first. But then others joined in. It was "This Little Light of Mine" again. The same tune the little girl had sung a year ago. Only now the whole road sang it together. And it carried. Up the hills. Through the grass. Into the trees. Into me. Later that night, I walked the road alone one last time. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The lanterns from the candle walk still glowed faintly. Someone had placed fresh flowers on the bench, and the wind whispered through the sycamore like a voice I'd missed and finally found again. I stopped at the southern bend and looked up at the stars. Then I did something I hadn't done since Sarah passed. I sat down, took off my hat, and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, there was nothing to guard, nothing to fight, just peace, and a dirt road underfoot that no longer carried the weight of silence, but the strength of 1,000 footsteps walking forward, together.